Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode. Sorry it's been a while since the last video, it's been a bit hectic over here, but I'm back and ready to show you a new tutorial. So in this one we are going to be making a flying player character this time. So we have, we still have our flying follower, we still have our flying enemy, and if we go track down this enemy right here, you'll see he is kind of clipping through the thing, but he does track onto us, and when we hold shift, our enemy still shoots, and we can rotate, we can move, and everything is really smooth and fluid. So I'm going to show you how to make this right now. So let's open up the project that we've been using for the tutorial series. So here I am. I'm going to delete what was already there. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is you'll see that there is a third person BP folder and there's a blueprints folder that we've been working in. You can make a player thing here if you're going to stop using the third person character altogether and you want to keep everything in one spot. But since we might go back to the third person blueprint folder during the third person character folder for the tutorial series and maybe in another episode, I'm just going to put all of our player characters together. So I'm going to use this third person BP folder. Inside that there's the blueprints, and you'll see here there's our third person character. So what we want to do is we want to make a new blueprint class of type character, and we're going to call this one flying character. So there's only a couple things we have to do to get up and running. So we're going to add back in our follower talk interface that we've been using for queries and stuff like that. And what we need to do now is we need to disable the use controller rotation yaw, since we are going to be applying our own rotation. Also, we're going to add two functions here. One is going to be called get input vector, and the other one is going to be called get input rotation. Get input rotation, and the get input rotation is going to return a rotator, and the get input vector is going to return a vector. And we'll just call this one input vector and input rot. And you want to switch both of these to a pure function since they do not change anything and they just return a value. And lastly, the last thing we need to do to get set up is we need to go into our project settings and we need to add some new inputs. So for what's called 6 degrees of freedom movement, we need obviously there's left and right, and then there's also up, which is not included in the basic template, and then there's also you have turn and move and look up, but we also need a roll. So we're going to add roll, and we are going to add move up. So move up is going to be spacebar and left control. You can set these to whatever you want. And just thinking about it, so when it comes to scale here, so when we look at the get actor up vector, you'll see that it says up. There is no down vector, so that would mean that pushing space would go up and pushing control would go down. So what we need to do here is set left control to be -1 if we want left control to go down. And similarly with the roll, we're going to do Q and E. And we'll have E be positive and Q be negative. Perfect. So for this one, what we need to do is we need to get actor forward vector. We need to get all the vectors here. So we're also going to do get actor right vector, and we're going to do get actor up vector. And we're going to multiply this by a float and copy this 3 times, plug all these in, and then we're going to add the vectors together. And I just realized we're in the rotation, but it's okay, we can just cut this out and paste it in the other one. So we'll cut all of this out, compile save, and go back to the vector one and plug it in here. So we're going to plug in the vector here, and now we need to actually get the floats to multiply by. So instead of using the built-in functions, we're just going to be getting the raw values. So we're going to get move forward, we're going to get move right, and we're going to get move up. And if you don't see move up, you just need to make sure you compile, and you should be able to see these functions. Perfect. So this looks 100% set up here. Now we're going to do the rotation. So the rotation is actually much simpler. So we're going to get turn. We're going to get look up. And we're going to get roll. So roll goes into here. Look up goes into pitch, and turn goes into yaw. Simple as that. And so lastly, we need to actually build out our character and add some of the last functions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set character movement to flying, default land movement flying, and we're not going to do any swimming, so we're just set that to the flying as well. And if you want, you can come down here and you can increase your speed if you wanted to. Just make sure you're under the flying category, and then also we'll add a little bit of braking and deceleration, so that way our player does come to a stop over time. So since it's a default character and not something with a template, we don't have any camera or anything like that. So we need to add in a spring arm. And on top of the spring arm, we're going to click it and we're going to type camera, and it should add a camera under the spring arm. Let's put in the mesh first. So under mesh, we're not going to be using a skeletal mesh, and this is inherited so we can't remove it. But underneath the mesh, so I have it selected, I'm just going to add another cone here. And you'll see that it's parented under the mesh. And we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. And we're also going to scale it down just a little bit, so it gives it more of like a spaceship kind of vibe. And scale it like that, and maybe bring it in just a little bit. And then you'll notice that the capsule collision is what handles all of your collision for the game. So I'm going to actually put this at the edge over here. We're going to keep the default radius. There is no way in a character to actually change a capsule to a cube or anything like that. But what you can do is when you're making your projectiles and stuff like that, you can set the capsule to a different collision profile. You'll see that it's of type pawn. And you can set your cone to be of a different collision profile. So when you do, like for example, we use traces in our last tutorial for projectiles, you can set that trace to only look for the specific object type. And if you wanted to add your own object type, you just go into edit, project settings, and then there's a collision option here, and you can add a new object channel. And we'll say, for example, here we're going to do we'll do true hitbox or something like that. This is just an example. We're not actually going to be doing this for the tutorial. I just wanted to, in case you guys did want it, I didn't want to leave you guys hanging for another tutorial or anything like that. And we go back over to projectiles, and you'll see here, if we compile save this again, we can remove this pawn and we can find true hitbox instead of pawn. And what this would do is it would ignore this capsule component, and it would only hit the actual hitbox here, as long as we set this to be of that type. So object type, and we set it to be, we have to compile again, we have to go here, and true hitbox, there you go, you should see now. But for now, we're going to set this to no collision, and we're going to remove those changes. That's just to get you started on the right track if you wanted to actually import this, implement this yourselves. So we're going to set this back to pawn, and we're going to compile save, undo all of our changes. So that's enough of the tangent. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring down this capsule component. So what the capsule component will be doing for us, if we were to ignore it for collisions and something like that, it would serve as the collision in the world. So you want to make sure that it's a proper size where you're okay with the amount of clipping you'd see outside of the box. I'm fine with just leaving it like this, but to each their own, you know. I know a lot of people, they like to really fine-tune their collisions. But for the purposes of this tutorial, this is just fine. And lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to go back over to the spring arm. We're going to raise it up a bit. So we'll do socket offset in the Z range of about 20, maybe 30, maybe 40. So we go back into flying player query here, and what we can do is we can find our old character. and we can just copy in all the stuff we need. So we need to know what we need to get. So it still uses character movement. And also, just quickly wanted to say the reason we do use character movement is because you can make something like this with a pawn and flying player movement, but the reason I like character movement is in case you ever wanted to play around with networking or anything like that, you won't have to go back in and redo your entire project as a character. You can, for just the actual player itself, obviously for enemies and AIs and stuff like that, I would use pawn, but for the character there is a lot of built-in networking that should help with replication and stuff like that that's built in, and you'll see here that there's tabs for it and everything like that. So this is one of the main reasons I love character movement and in Unreal Engine, because they just make it so easy for stuff like this. So back to the project, we need to make sure query valid is set to true. For the rotation, remember this is the way that the fleeing follower AI faces. So we're going to drag in our camera into the get roll rotation, and now we need the 2 points on the backside. So we'll go back under cone and we'll do scene component, and you'll see that they're parented under that. We'll name this one right and bring it back, and then we'll duplicate it, and let's see, in the Y it's 80, so we'll set the left one to -80, and we'll just rename this one left. Perfect. And then we go back over to flying player query, we drag the left into the left one here, and we drag the right into the right one here. And then last but not least, we need to actually work on the movement. So it's a good idea to avoid tick, and that's why we use the timers in all of our AIs. But when it comes to things that the player is interacting with, if you really want that feeling of seamless movement, tick is kind of really the only way to go. And all the default stuff, like if we go back over here, turn and look up and stuff like that, these are tick events. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a tick event of our own. So we go back over to our flying character, and we're going to do a sequence here. The first sequence we're going to do, hold on here, I think we're going to drag off of the character movement, drag it into the scene, and we're going to add input vector. And we're going to get input vector, and we're going to drag it in there. And then we're also going to add actor local rotation. And we're just going to drag in get input rotation here. Perfect. And if you're wondering the reason why we do not use these functions, is because they use something called control rotation, which is something set in your player controller. And what it does is it'll limit the amount of rotation that you can do. So if you look down and you wanted to keep going, say for example like true 360-degree movement, you would have to tweak some of those settings. So it's much easier to just forego all control rotation, which is what we did at the beginning here, and we remove this control rotation yaw, and just rotate the actual actor itself. So lastly, what we need to do is we need to add the add follower event. Make sure it's the one that says event, add follower. And just like if you want, you can even copy paste this stuff. So we'll drag that in, we'll paste it here. And then we're going to click on the little variable here, and we're going to create a variable called followers, and you'll see that that's all set for us. And then we're also going to come over here and we're going to update we're going to copy over the shooting event. But on this one, we're going to delete this use control rotation yaw and just plug it in direct like that. Perfect. So now we are set to actually put this in our world. So here we have an auto-possessed character. So what we're going to do is we're just going to remove that, and we're going to have something called a player start. we'll just place that right there, and then we're in our world settings. If you don't see world settings, you just gotta come over here and open the menu for it. We're going to change our default pawn class to that flying character that we've been working on. And now if we test it out, so you'll notice that you guys can't see my mouse, but the up and down is inverted. If you don't like that, what you can do is you go over to project settings and you can change the input, look up to scale of 1 rather than -1. And we'll full screen this. So you'll see he still follows us. When we hold shift, he's still shooting because that's all handled through that interface that we just copied back over. And when we hover in front of our enemy right here, you'll see he starts shooting at us again. Awesome. So that's that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a good one. Take care. Bye.